Welcome everybody to the Shelburne Planning Commission on March 22nd. Well, I guess I just called it to order. The first item on the agenda is approval of the agenda. I think we're going to modify it a bit, but a motion to approve.
So moved.
And a second. So motion by Andy, second by Kate. So for discussion, we were just talking about how Susan, sorry, you're Susan, that Susan was going to be running a little late, so perhaps we start with the historic and cultural resources first, maybe towers and telecom. That should buy a little bit of time. So we're not actually shifting the agenda points around, but under item 6, we're just going to shuffle the order a little. Any comments? All right. Otherwise, if the agenda looks okay, all in favor?
Aye.
All right. Agenda approved. Now on to approval of the minutes of March 8th. I did not have any major comments. I had one mostly curious on page 4 in the triggers paragraph about 2/3 of the way down. It says that I said it is good to see where to focus growth and how to grow. And just when I read that, I wasn't sure what that meant. And if I said it, I just wanted to see if it made sense, because if it does, great. If it doesn't,
Oh, and then,
I think we were talking about triggers and everything, and I think you were responding to the organization side of it.
Yeah, the idea, I thought that you responded favorably to that idea that the RPC uses where there's a certain percentage of the growth for a particular area.
yeah, I do. It made me think about what I was meaning. I'm happy to keep it as is. It was just more, it threw me. So
can I just, a little clarification to the end of that paragraph where my statement, I meant that it's kind of where the town is growing, how and where. So it might be related to a part of the town.
So how do you want to?
So let's see, Kate Liley says data could be generated for the town report each year so residents see how and where the town is growing.
So probably in the form of a small chart or something.
Yeah, something like that.
So you just want to add and where?
Yes, and where, yeah, and, with what that means to be determined.
Okay. Jason, do you want to clarify a statement that you made?
no, I don't think so. It was more just I needed to say that out loud to.
Yeah, I think I came in just after that.
All right.
After that.
I do have a question. Did I spell Don Rendell's name right? Is it 2 E's or an E?
I think
and an
it's
A?
Endall.
Yes,
Okay.
that's right.
Good communication. Very well. So Rendall.
I believe so.
All right. Any other comments on the minutes from last time? All right.
What was it we were going to ask Mary Ann? That last meeting, remember if she was here? Anybody remember?
That was more than 2 minutes ago.
Okay.
I don't.
It had something to do with Williston, I think, right?
Oh, yes.
We were
Right.
talking about the
Yeah, last
Williston.
week. Last-
Yeah.
We were admiring your,
The rating system.
the rating system for in the rural areas. Yeah, and so since then, I actually ran into the planner in Williston, Ken Beliveau, and he said that they have 2-acre zoning in the rural area, so it's even potentially more troublesome than our 5-acre zoning, and that this was a way to really kind of micromanage that for the effects that they wanted. So anyway, yeah, we were hoping, we wanted to see what you what you thought of it, or
It's the rural areas. Oh, seriously? Since Because I've lived there. We've seen a lot of the rural area go into the developments that pretty much defined Williston now. Used to be farms and fields. So that 2 acres, it's a little protection, but not a lot.
Yeah, I really like that plan,
Yeah.
the way they're addressing that.
When did growth management start, that system? How far back did it
Well, we moved there in '84, and I'm going to say if it wasn't in place then, it was very soon after. Yeah, I
So
could.
back when Mike Munson was
Oh, definitely, definitely. And when I was on the select board in, probably in '87. I bet you it came in '87.
Yeah, I really like that.
Hang on. We had a question about the spelling of your name. It is Rendall, correct? Yes.
Excellent. I was just thinking I forgot to ask. So, a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved?
Moved by Kate. I have a second.
Second.
Seconded by Dick. All in favor? All right. So the next item is any disclosures relating to any potential conflicts of interest? Seeing none. Next is open to the public. If there are any items not currently included on the agenda? I think we're all agenda focused tonight. All right. So then, on to the comprehensive plan discussion. We'll hold off on the natural resources section for now. So if we want to start with the historic and cultural resources, is that?
Yeah. And then if we can be flexible, if Susan does get here.
Sure.
Carrie,
Yeah. Oh, certainly. Yeah, I think after the last couple of meetings, we all have an interest to be more on time. Okay, so the historic and cultural resource section. Make sure I'm not going to screw this up. Yep.
And I'm happy to fill some of the dead air, at least to start, with the comment that I did make an observation in the memo that covered this, where I said, from my perspective, that part of the reason for this check-in is to have given the Historic Preservation and Review Commission an opportunity to clarify any of the thoughts or concerns that I've heard them express, particularly having to do with infill. I don't see this as really the key place where some of those concerns would be worked into policy, but it's the area that historically they've had the most things to say. There's no one here from that group. I know we didn't talk about it this morning, but we did talk about it briefly at 2 weeks ago at their last meeting. So I think that if they are going to make any comments at all about that, it'll be when they're looking at the entire document, when we're down the road. But I didn't know that at the time I had written the memo.
No problem. I did have some just general comments. I don't know if we need to, or if we want to pull up the document and make updates, or just
I have it open
note.
on the editor or the speaker or whatever, so I have it open here, so I can try and capture things too.
Sure.
So Dean doesn't have to be.
I can just
Call it up, too. Yeah, because I emailed you all right as the day we got it that I added one more thing that didn't make the hard copy here, so it's probably worth seeing it up there. And it just relates to the discussions I had with the historical preservation people when they were here, and then when I met with them in coffee about kind of infill. That while they're happy about infill, wanting growth in the growth area versus other places, there's that fear that the infill will, the scale will be out of whack with the historic nature, and that any infill on like the backside of a lot is smaller in scale or hidden or disguised in a way. So you don't have this small historic house in the front of the lot with a huge thing sort of looming back over the top of it. So I added kind of a note reflecting their desire there.
Okay. And my comments, at least on the first page, were more like the first section. I think it looked like there might have been just like a cut and paste move. That looks different than what I'm looking at.
Yeah, so the printed version in the packets is a PDF version that I marked up. So it's not in the Google format. I was trying to have a way to show the edits, the red lines with the comments, and that's what I did that was most expeditious to get the packets together. So if it looks slightly different, but the text, there'll be whatever Andrew added after the time that I downloaded that file, which would have been midday, Thursday, a week ago.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, and basically those ones that Dean put here in these little boxes with the arrows were just reflecting my comments. You know, because I wasn't changing anything. I was just making a note that as we go to final copy, we don't know if it's going to be map 15, right? It could be map 27 in the next.
Right.
That's all
version.
those are, is the two changes were just,
Well, those were things that were there going back a ways. I just didn't accept them as changes or resolve them just because I wanted that to kind of remain as like a reminder that didn't get overlooked. And whereas the other one that I added, if Dean could scroll down on the screen there to the recommended actions. That one that's in purple is the infill piece I was just verbally describing.
I should have gone in and read that. I knew I was going to and I never did. You s-
I think that maybe I'd like to suggest that a more kind of proactive way to state that would be, instead of, we have a lot of developments, a lot of standards that say development should not do these things, but we never really specify what we want development to do. And so I think in the village, that's one area where it's very, very clear what we would want any kind of infill development to do. You just stated it earlier, which is to maintain the visual and functional scale of the village area. So that would suggest to me that, you can have lot layout standards that specify how that scale and function is to be maintained when you do add. So we don't want to discourage somebody adding, like an accessory dwelling or something like that in the village. So it's focusing and guiding and controlling how it happens. So I guess I'd like to just, suggest that we, are more proactive about how we state that, so that, I don't know, I think sometimes it seems like we're working to cross purposes when we're actually not. We're actually trying to just be clear about what our expectations are in certain areas. So that's kind of my takeaway from the discussion
And how
on
does that-
reactions on the infill question.
How does that, how would we capture that? I guess
So while infill development in the designated growth area will benefit the town, you could say something like, particularly in the village area, it is, it must not deviate from the visual and functional scale of the historic village,
okay.
something like that.
Still even more firm.
Yes.
Say
Okay.
an opportunity to add to the vibrancy of commerce and residential and,
yes.
Right.
suggest things that might be
Right.
a great,
The things that,
carriage house
that everybody could
structure.
get around, and then suggest, lot layout. Form-based code is a way to, is a tool for implementing, lot layout standards that would achieve this, or something like that.
What happens to an accessory when the property becomes commercial? Say that, well, if you, in order to have an accessory, theoretically, somebody has to live in one unit or the other.
We're talking about an accessory apartment, so if it goes commercial, then you have to look at the zoning to see whether or not that building with the residential unit and the new commercial use would comply with the zoning regulations. The commercial uses require bigger lots, they require bigger, larger frontages, larger setbacks. So, I guess it would depend, Dick. Are you, what is the concern?
I was
Is the
wondering,
concern that-
not really concerned, it's a question. If someone wanted to put a sandwich shop in, and they
In a
added
home?
and they have their home, a 2-story home, and they add an accessory, so they're going to be prohibited from changing the lower floor to a commercial?
Not necessarily, no.
Because then
In the village center district, that could happen. There's encouragement to retain residential uses, and if the lot meets the commercial area requirements, it
We
could happen.
should probably note that and make a change in zoning. Because it seems like if it wouldn't be an accessory any longer,
No, it'd be a residential use in a commercial, well, it'd be a mixed-use building.
so it'd end up being a duplex and a commercial use.
Well, that would be two
If it
residential
were
uses.
allowed, I'm asking the question. You know, just,
It's going to depend on the specifics of the lot, but someone could, in a village, have a parcel where there's a building and it was residential before, and they could convert the ground story into commercial use and have the upstairs be residential. It wouldn't be a duplex, that would be residential use in a building that has commercial on the ground floor.
okay. I think it's something we
But
definitely
if the
have to
lot
address
wasn't
at
large
some point.
enough, I mean, that's where the specifics of the situation come in, because there are different requirements for lot size and the amount of frontage that come into play.
Yeah, I wasn't thinking so much about the use of things at this point, but just trying to address that concern about the formal characteristics, the built outcome that, you know, the HPDRC was understandably, you know, concerned about.
It probably would make more sense just to, if there's enough room to build a duplex as opposed to, or add enough to make a duplex if it's legal, as opposed to an accessory. Just add, to make it a 2-family home if there's enough space.
So are you're looking at a situation where someone has a house and they know something about it has to change, or someone new
Well,
picks
I'm-
up the property?
Yeah, I'm just kind of thinking out loud.
Thinking of like what Gwen Webster did for her house when she was living there. And
Which-
she had the quilt shop in back.
Oh, okay.
Is that an example?
I don't know, but that building was there before, wasn't it?
I don't know.
Yes,
it
there
was.
was a little building.
Yeah. No, I was just thinking the best way of doing the infill, would it be an accessory apartment or would it be converting to a duplex?
Well, a duplex, I think, is normally associated with one structure, right? It's one structure that's subdivided into two, whereas the accessory dwelling can be part of the existing structure, or it can be, you know, in like a carriage house or over garage or something
Right.
like that. So I think, is that
Well, the
distinction
thing about
important?
the difference is essentially going to boil down to what's the comparison in size. If they're roughly equal in size, then it would be a duplex. To qualify for an accessory apartment, it's going to be, it'll be a minor portion. It'll be less than 50% of the size of the house. So you can have by right an accessory apartment because it is small in size relative to the house.
Is
If-
that always in the same contiguous structure or including a separate?
The statute
Building.
uses the phrase appurtenant, and our legal counsel has interpreted appurtenant as allowing it to be in an outbuilding. It doesn't have to be in some other attorneys in other towns say it has to be in the same building. It can't be in an outbuilding.
So, Dick, are you concerned about an instance where somebody might have a house, and then, let's say they establish an accessory dwelling in another structure, a garage or carriage house, something like that, and then they decide that they want to just live upstairs and have the downstairs become a commercial use? Is that what you're sort of thinking? Like,
That's
would they
where
be
I was-
allowed
I
to?
was thinking about that.
Okay.
And the rules for accessory are that you have to live on site, so if you get into that type of conversion, most people aren't going to be there. So I don't know if it's, and that's something I think, I kind of wish I hadn't gotten into.
Okay, all right.
But South Burlington, when they have a separate building, they have a 15-foot height restriction, and they have a size limitation as well. And I don't remember what the size limitation was.
Well, I would imagine that whatever we did we would very much ask for the input of the historic preservation folks on what, they think is appropriate. But the idea would be that in the village, some kind of a form-based, approach to building types and lot layout and all of that would be, the purpose would be to maintain and preserve the setting of the village. In the growth area, it could have a different purpose. It might be to, in a part of the growth area that doesn't have anything right now, it would be to establish a sort of standard for development. It might be a type that could fit in with other things that are nearby. I mean, there would be different goals, in different places. So I'm trying to kind of keep it, us focused on the outcomes that we want.
And the only other question I had with the historic piece that I never really resolved in my own head was that the very last recommended action refers to evaluate development proposals that may have a significant negative impact on historical and cultural resources. Such proposals may include, and then not limited to, they mentioned cellular telephone towers. And we'd had that discussion about the 5G smaller things. So I don't think we need to change anything, but the only question in my head was, is that still considered a tower? The piece, so whether we need to sort of specifically like cell repeater or whatever that thing would be. But anyway, I think in most ways that's technological development that's actually more going to fit in the historic village better because it's smaller, more disguisable as some piece of a building or something versus, a fake spire or a fake tree or some, large structure. I mean, they're pretty small.
Yeah.
There just could be a lot more of them, right? The standard talks about every, 150 feet or a couple hundred feet, little nodes, yeah. But otherwise, I took my cue more from that committee who had done a lot of work on this rev of the plan before. We're very happy with it. Wanted a little more teeth in some pieces. We did that last rev, and I felt like the only thing I'd forgotten to include in looking at my notes the last time was that infill piece and that scale discrepancy. Yeah, it's just, if you go, it's the very last piece was the thing I was reading. Keep going. There, number 12. It just talks about wind turbines, cell telephone towers, solar energy facilities, etc. I mean, the cellular telephone tower seems like the generic term to capture whether it's 4G, 5G, 6G, LTE, whatever technology.
When I read this, my first thought was, I don't want this to come out wrong, was that it seemed questionable to me, mostly because I don't want to, the way it's phrased to say that to ensure that it doesn't have a significant negative impact on historic and cultural resources, I could see that being used. I mean, what's the definition of a significant negative impact? Like, I understand the need for this, and I agree with it. Mm-hmm. But when I'm reading it through, like I'm not a lawyer, but like through a legal lens sort of thing, where you're just saying, what does this say? I could see that being argued.
And I think those guys want more teeth, but they can't say no, right? They can just recommend and kind of advise and steer. So I just don't even know how much.
Yeah,
right.
With that, yeah, I guess that's as long as the voice is there and we're pointing out this is something that we want understood, but it's not to say that something couldn't happen. And what I have in mind is maybe there's more details that I'm not aware of, but there was a solar installation that was going to go in Charlotte, and there was a big push against it because you could see it from the top of Mount Philo.
Right.
Like, is that a reason not to have solar? Personally, I don't think so. I don't think that it would wreck tourist dollars and that sort of thing. And again, there
Especially
might
'cause
be
you
a
can
lot of
see a
details
third of
around
the
that.
state from
Right, you
up
can see a
above.
lot of things from when you get up high enough. So I just want to make sure that we're reasonable in how we're balancing things, because you could always take things to extreme and then nothing happens.
Well, this again, points to the need for maybe some considering regulations that might shape how this happens. So, do it like this, not like this, kind of, this is desired, this would be undesirable. So, we're not standing in the path of some of this stuff, which is, frankly, important to sustaining our economy and, reducing the cost of energy and, all those things. It's all additive.
And that's the balance that I'm just trying to make sure we strike. I don't want to be too extreme one way or the other, but make sure that the conversation can happen and decisions can be made with the right.
Well, speaking
Understanding.
of Charlotte and a solar array, I was just on Mount Philo at the intersection with the school and on, coming down Churchill. And it was a beautiful day, and I was looking out across the vista, to up where you see Spear Street, and noticed that the solar array that is in the field over there on the left before you get to Spear Street off of the Shelburne Hinesburg Road is it's really, it follows the ridge lines. It's really tucked in visually. It reads like a row of trees or something like that. I mean, it's for what it is. It's pretty good how it's tucked in there. And I felt like I was seeing it at the visually the toughest time of the year for something like that, because it's winter, right? We don't
no
have any
screening.
vegetation at all. And I thought, I thought it was a great example of how you can integrate something aesthetically in a way that's pretty de minimis.
I often find, coming up on Route 7 from Virgins, on the west side, there's a huge solar installation, and I always mistake it for water because of the way it's laid out there. So it
Yeah,
can
the
be
one-
done well.
Yeah, and the one you're talking about, I've come at it from other angles and thought, I didn't know there was a pond there, and
Yeah.
it's just the way the sun hits it, it looks like a dark pond with low
Yeah.
light, and then I realized, oh, that's an array.
Those types of considerations are amazing. Like,
Yeah.
that should always be included in how do you make things blend as much as possible. And the telecom siting bylaw ordinance that has similar language in terms of where you can place towers and make sure that visually they're not just being really obvious in the middle of a field sort of thing.
It's our best attempt to try to influence what is primarily a process that's not under our control, as the Public Utility Commission, formerly Public Service Board. And that was the point that I wanted to make, that at least in response to Kate's comment about, saying what we want, we can and we should, but this is primarily a state regulatory process. And I should have made this comment before, and you had asked Jason about what could significant negative impact mean. In that process, in Act 250 and Section 248, the undue adverse standard is one that's pretty well established, and undue adverse is included in this in connection with noise because that's where we've used it as well. But that has a very specific meaning. So to the, you had said kind of a legal concern, undue adverse has an established meaning. And the reason why there are those cases where the Public Service Board says a project doesn't get approval, like in Charlotte, does it offend the sensibilities of the average person? Something that everybody would just find repugnant. Okay, it fails. Does it violate a clear written community standard? And that's where, by having clear language in our plan or in our bylaws, the Public Utility Commission might say, this is not meeting a clear written community standard. And then there's another one that has to do with, are you doing the things that you could to mitigate the impact? So there is, if you choose to use something like undue adverse, a pretty established meaning about when it would, you would need to have a clear written community standard for a project to be denied. If you say undue adverse and you have no clear written community standards, well, you're never going to have a project denied because of that. You can't make one up on the spur of the moment. You have to have a clear written community standard that an applicant would be able to read and say, oh, I better not put that at the base of Mount Philo, or at least there was some disagreement about whether or not it was there.
Okay.
So anyway, in terms of edits, maybe you want to have undue adverse in twice, if you are concerned about what significant impact could mean.
No, it was more an observation. Given this discussion, I'm okay with that.
So instead of significant negative, might have an undue adverse impact on historic culture, and then also add undue adverse level of noise below?
Yeah.
Okay. And is it always undue, comma, adverse?
Is it always that? I'm not certain.
Okay.
I think maybe not always a comma.
I guess I should make that a suggestion, right?
And basically undue is a substitute for significant. You know, first of
Yeah.
all, is there a negative impact? And then is that impact so significant that it's undue, or is it significant?
Right.
And that's how, and that test is how you determine whether or not it's significant.
Well, seems like a good edit.
Yeah. And then on the point above that, if we're good on
11?
Yeah. The thought crossed my mind, so I'll say it out loud, and I know that we've got committee members in here that may disagree. But the having it mirror the existing open space fund, I was trying to think of this from an approval perspective and how things work. Would there be an argument to have it be a small percentage of that fund or something that way so that you don't get into multiple funds that complicate a budget process? And obviously the negative side to that would be that you'd want to have more in the open space fund to compensate for that, not looking to take from the funds that are designated to open space, which is,
Could be a huge argument.
Yeah,
I mean, I know that that's a can of worms. I just,
I think this, I mean, from my conversation with this, and again, I'm going back on memory of talking to them, was that, yeah, I don't think they would want to be the historic preservation group. I don't think they would want to be part, I mean, they're two different things, right? There's,
Really very different.
one's preserving the agricultural open areas, you know, or the scenic beauty, and the other one is the downtown core and the historic piece. So I think they just felt slighted that these guys have a fund and they don't, you know. So yeah, it would be.
Barely.
right.
For what it's
Needs
worth,
to be
the PAS
bigger.
committee would like a fund too. They would
Yeah.
like to have a fund where, you know,
Yeah.
Well, and that's where my head was going, is that this could tumble into, I mean, for the open space fund, that's a ballot item that people vote on. So are we going to end up with multiple ballot items to say, do we want X amount to go to open space, which I understand is going to be referred to as conservation fund,
We would like to.
or that's the proposal? And then we'd have one for historic preservation, one for PAS. Like, I mean, does everybody get a fund and then there's
This is
just
why
a,
Burlington started a foundation for their Parks Department. So private philanthropy could be generated to enhance the beauty of their public parks. So if one were so inclined to support the church before it's torn down, one would simply donate to a separate foundation that was not part of the budget. It's a freestanding nonprofit.
Yeah, I think there are inherent conflicts. If you think about open space and then you're talking about historic preservation, or you're talking about particularly recreation, some recreation uses are not appropriate for a conserved area, and I think it could get really muddy.
I think most people go to the ballot box with the idea of purchasing land. I think it's fairly clear to most people, so maybe avoiding at least that fund in relation to this one.
Just a question, so when you guys are looking at using some of your money from your fund, is it usually part of the deal and there might be a conservation easement type group that's also using it?
We try very hard to use third-party organizations that have the capacity to be able to save things in perpetuity.
Right.
Because if we use the money in the town and then we have a different select board, they could decide to make it into a, a baseball field or
Right.
something like that, that's not really conserving the property.
And do those organizations, though, like seeing that the town has sort of got some skin in the game, that you're putting some of the money up?
It's really critical.
Yeah.
With the Vermont Land Trust, for instance, they work really closely with the Housing Conservation Board, and they need to nail down where the other funding is coming from before they go to the Housing Conservation Board to see that the town is committed to do it.
Got it. Okay.
And I will state, I clearly know that all the funds that are in that fund need to be going to open space conservation. I was thinking more administratively, would that just be adding a lot of complexity or hosing a budget process? Like, are we creating a bigger problem?
I think ultimately reflects the philosophy of the board. I mean, there are people who are decision makers who don't like to have lots of money going into disparate pots of money because they feel in their legislative role, it's their job to be making the proposals for the divisions. If these funds are created, then part of their role is diminished. It's not, I mean, the mechanics of setting up a separate fund are not all that great. Peter sets up funds all the time.
Right.
You just have the question of, okay, if there is a set up fund, then what is the amount that's up for vote? That's Gail can talk to you about the process every year that's people go through to decide, well, what's the number that's going to be included?
What if we just establish the right to establish and invest a historic preservation fund that people can contribute to? Just
Yeah,
to set
and I
up-
like the
just to
idea of the
set up-
foundation as well.
Just to set up the fund, but not a method of raising.
And just have it be
Not-
something that people could contribute to, and you could have a stand at the farmer's
They can
market
try to
asking for
encourage people
donations
to,
and,
right.
yeah.
Which would allow them
Sometimes have a
probably
land
the-
trust that's not part of the town government. And it could be that there might be a desire to have a cultural trust or something like that. Where it doesn't have to be vetted by the select board, but where it's a private group. Charlotte, I think, has a private land trust.
Something like that, Dick,
Yeah.
that, investigation or preservation of the mirrors existing, but can also receive private contributions, or
Yeah, maybe thin it out a little bit and take out,
I would
that
take out-
mirrors the existing open fund?
Yeah,
Okay.
I would do that, yeah.
yeah.
Because it could be interesting, this could be tied in with, I'm just thinking about the economic development in the village. I mean, this could be tied into a lot of things,
Why don't
like
people-
street trees, or, there could be a bunch of different, I don't know,
Somebody might love
overlaps.
the village and just want to
Yeah.
write a check, and
Place-based kinds of enhancements,
so at least give it a place to go
yeah. So,
without committing to.
Should we leave open the option that it could be funded privately and or publicly? Something to that effect?
yeah,
Certainly couldn't hurt.
Okay. Should I say that and or?
because it would be nice if it could be some kind of economic development tool, wouldn't it?
Yes, I do. Thank you, Don. Close reader that you are.
Yeah, alert.
Mr. Book Club over here. Thank you.
All right.
So if that's that one, I had some minor things, but looking at the bigger ones on number 3 above,
Number 3 of the recommended actions,
yes.
establish and provide access to a database.
Yeah, I'm starting to look at things and try to think about how they can have the biggest impact. So is that something that could be considered to be added to the HBDRC charter? Versus just having a recommended action to do that? Because I feel like it would just go, it would be that group that would drive it, I would imagine.
Well, they're already responsible for maintaining what's called the survey. this is a database, the survey is a book. I'm sure that the next time we do it, it'll look more like a database.
So I guess my question then would be, like, if they wouldn't do it, what would the process be to have that established?
Well, I just know when we talked about this one before, I think I had added at that point this last sentence to identify and develop plans for the most endangered assets in town, because that was what their big thing was, is that they do keep lists and we have, everybody kind of knows what they are, but rather than just keeping a list of things that are in danger and then, kind of reactionary method going, wait, you're going to do that with that building, oh my God, and then having to try and deal with it after some process already started. They wanted to have a kind of, could be literally a top 5, top 3, whatever, and have this sense that the town could proactively look at things. I mean, the example they used often was the appliance store here, adjacent to town hall, that, if they ever decide they want to do something with that, that should be something that the town has identified as, we would like to talk to you about that asset, because it fits right inside, near the campus of so many other things, the library and coffee shop and other things, and something that the town would want to make sure was done the right way. There's a little house that's sort of falling apart just south of the Shelburne supermarket. So if you're heading down Fall Road on the left, it looks like it's disintegrating back into the woods a little bit. That's a pretty significant historic house in their mind, but they're worried about watching it sort of decay, and then it's too far gone to save, and therefore it can be ripped down, and they would want to identify that as something that could be.
And,
So-
and I do understand, and I support doing it. I'm just curious, so if there isn't any kind of specification of, hey, this group can do that, like, I feel like
Right.
it'll just sit there in the plan forever.
Right.
Nothing's gonna
Their
happen.
job is to do that. I mean,
Okay, so this-
yeah, the HBDRC is responsible. Shelburne has a status that's called certified local government, and in order to have that status, the select board years ago created the HBDRC, and that's one of the requirements in order to do it. That makes us eligible for funding from the National Park Service. And the responsibilities include doing a survey and reviewing projects that are in areas that are National Register districts, preparing National Register nominations. And so anyway, Shelburne created it. It's an ordinance in the town records, and their mandate includes updating this survey. They've just let that project fall behind. So they need to do it, and if they didn't update the survey for another 5 years, we would probably be hearing from the Division for Historic Preservation, when are you going to apply for the funds to update the survey as opposed to do something else?
Okay. So basically what I'm hearing then is it's understood that as far as these recommended actions go, having that in the plan gives them something they can point to say, plan says we should do this, we can do that.
Yeah, if there was pushback about a CLG application, because these applications require a match. So for example, and it's a 40% match, it's more than some other grants. And if the select board was saying, no, we really don't think, then they could look at language like this and say, no, we're supposed to do this, and we haven't updated it since 2001, and so therefore, follow the policies in the plan.
Okay. Yeah, anything else that I had is really minor, and I can just,
Yeah,
Shut
send them
you.
my way.
yeah.
I have a question, and I don't know if it fits into this part or not, but I've heard people who have restaurants complaining about the fact that there's no ability to do outdoor seating in town for restaurants, and it seems to me that that's something that really enhances the vibrancy of the village, and at some point it might be nice to address that somewhere in the
You did.
plan.
We did fix it.
You didn't change that?
Yeah.
But it has to be hidden behind a fence,
I don't-
right?
I think
if
that's
it's next to residential.
Well, yeah, so, I mean, that affected places like Rustic Roots and stuff
But
like
they
that.
only need a fence on that, just between the residents.
Okay.
It's just a privacy thing.
Thank you.
Is that like 2 years?
Yeah, it has changed. And another place where that,
And Rustic Roots, that was from before, oh, not Rustic Roots, I'm thinking of the other place, Bark Eaters. That was from before.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so Rustic Roots it would be easier for them to do something. Yeah, they wouldn't have to go through all the hoops that Bark Eaters did. Yeah,
That's good to know, 'cause I'm not sure people know.
yeah. You know, I mean, maybe some kind of little Shelburne News article, like, you know, the wonderful things about our zoning that you might not know about and have always wondered.
Top 5 improvements.
I like that.
I'm sure it would be a big seller.
Yeah, there may be other things that would come into play that it's a detail that they haven't mentioned, some kind of weird
This could
aspect
become
of their
something like-
approval. It's not really a restaurant,
that
it's
we
food
protect our
retail,
CLG
and so
status.
that's where
Yeah.
no one ever
Well,
bothered to go
That was years
back.
ago when they opened, but I've heard other people who are interested in doing restaurants say the same thing, so.
Yeah, so some of the issue has to do with seating, and it could very well be that they don't want the outdoor seating to be counting towards a parking requirement. And if it's seating, and it's driving a need for parking, and they would like the outdoor seating to be, you know, kind of free seats, that may be the rub.
Okay.
We have our full complement now.
We have a move up here so
And
that
so,
we're all.
Kate, I made 10 copies of what you emailed, and so maybe you want to explain. And I also have it on.
Yeah, I just wasn't able to have time to get onto the actual document, so I just did it this way. So Dawn had sent me the document that you guys had edited, so I just stuck my edits in that, so. So, did everybody get a chance to look through?
Yes.
To look through? So, first I want to just congratulate you and commend you on the really, wonderful job. This is just a lot of thoroughness and,
And back to you for including us.
yeah, so I just wanted to kind of,
This takes off on, just so this is what they had done?
Yes,
And
uh-huh.
then this is your,
yes,
Further up.
yeah. To just kind of carry it a little further, I hope, and try and integrate it into the vision for the future land use, which we're trying to have integrated elements be, natural resource protection, connectivity, walkability, and also a little more direction about future settlement patterns and how all this, because I think they're all interrelated. So, working on saying that in clear, pithy terms is an ongoing process, at least for me. If I could just make pictures of it, it'd be easier. But I know the word smithing has to come first. So, so anyway, I just had a couple of thoughts that my comments are in red. Just adding, strengthening, I hope. It'll come across as what you were saying. And I thought it was important to get right in there that residents have long supported sustaining this ethos of environmental stewardship that we have, with our pocketbooks. I thought that was important to put in there, because I think that's something that is unique and special about our community. And then I just changed the order a little bit of the second paragraph, and just to create a kind of larger context for describing the scenic and natural resources, where they're located, and why this is important. And then just added a small paragraph at the end that talks about the fact that these are finite resources, and that conserving them brings many benefits. That support Shelburne as a place that will continue to be a nice place to live long into the future. And then I wanted to introduce the idea of energy use and land consumption as important factors in focusing and guiding land development, so that where development happens matters, and how it happens in those places. Just because I think there's some really amazing work that's being done in other places about planning with the watershed and using the infiltration capacity of a piece of land to guide what can happen. And we've started to get into some of that with the form-based code work in Route 7. That part of the investigations that were done revealed that the land to the north of the corridor actually had some of the best infiltration capacity, which prompted a conversation about, well, how about if we thought about in that area modifying the zoning regulations to have smaller footprint, but maybe compensate with height of the buildings. So just trying to be more place specific, and I would love it if wanted to support you guys in translating as much as possible this information into various maps and overlays. It's getting more straightforward for how we do that all the time. And I would love it if you guys could develop some kind of a map that would take all of this information and basically say where you think development should happen in the future, and where, because we got to put it somewhere, right? And where it should definitely not happen, because right now we're really we are sort of in a position of just saying, well, we would like it to not happen here, and then it happens, and we have these impacts, and so.
Or everything's open for business.
Or everything's right, yeah. So I think we can try to be a little bit more specific about that, and there are tools for, there are plenty of tools out there for doing it. So it should be something that is not too impossible to do. But why don't you guys start with creating a map of like what you would like, and that's the vision, and then we figure out how we, the regulations for how we get there. And we may discover that we can't get all of the things that we want, but if we can sort of, you guys can develop like a kind of triage system because I don't think we even really have that information yet. Like what absolutely should we just not develop? What is so precious that we just should not? And what are the criteria? That could be for different reasons, right? Habitat, erodible soils. I don't know. I mean, what would those criteria be? And so where I'm going with this is something that would be a tool, kind of like a transect, that could really explain a bit more what you'd like to see in various places. And we could calibrate settlement or development types to go with that. But the idea is everything would be driven by the resources, scenic and natural. So that would be the driver of all of this. So, I mean, that's what I would like.
If I can just kind of get a handle, the document that you emailed me was the version that had been drafted by the Natural Resources Committee, to which you made some edits?
Yes,
maybe?
well, it was something that Dawn sent to me a couple days ago.
Okay, so maybe if you wouldn't mind, or if there's no better alternative, Dawn or the group can make some kind of presentation on the parts of the document that you changed or things that you wanted to highlight. I didn't know, did you have any slides or anything that you wanted to zero in on, or do you want to work through page by page to get the edits? Because this document has had edits that aren't shown in edit tracking, is that right?
Yes.
Right, yeah.
So there's no easy way to say, oh, well, this is new or that's new. It's really going to take the group saying, well, we added language to address this issue and it's here.
Oh.
I mean, is that?
We
'Cause
had
this
done
is-
that initially before these last several weeks, and then had been actually working in the document that was in the Google Drive to make our changes, so that the document that's in the Google Drive was not the original Old Town Plan anymore.
Okay.
Yeah, and then we had some further comments, and I had 6 hours to then try to pull everything together to get into Dean's packet to you guys. So I didn't know how to work on the Google document, so I pulled what we had in there, made one new version with all the red lines that came to you.
Oh, okay.
Those red lines, I tried to get back from the, so I gave Dean 2 documents. One was the original language from what's up on the town's website. Then with all of our red lines, all the changes that I had to that point. But some of them were not even run by our other subcommittee members, so it was, in a sense, trying to remember what people were saying, so.
Yeah, and that's what was in your packet, so to get
Okay.
the best sense of what was moving around, there was that PDF that was posted on the web and also printed out, and so if you need some points of reference between the changes in the document that you received tonight, then we can flip back and forth. Or maybe you want to work from this one.
Well, so that one that came in your packet is the original from the town website with all of our changes in red. And then I had a second one that would just be that, take out all the scratches and here's what the final version of it would be. And Dean did not choose to include that, so I sent
Yeah,
it
and
to
I'm
you.
Oh, and so that's the
Because-
one I'm using. Okay, got it, okay.
Susan and I were away for a good part of the month. And so we had been working on what was in the Google Drive.
Okay.
And I'm not sure if that's the same document, that's not the same
Well, I-
document you were working from.
I took that one, made it, because I didn't know how to make our additional edits from our meetings into that and make it clear in the 6 hours I had.
No, right,
So I just pulled it and revised it in a separate.
but that's a second document that we don't have here tonight.
No, that's these two. So this is, yeah.
Yeah, this is, so then it's not what's on the website, it's on what's on the Google Drive.
The Google Drive does not have any of this.
Because I
I
made
took the Google-
changes after our meeting
I
on
think
the
we'll
Google
remember as
Drive.
we go through some of the more substantive changes, don't you think? Since we went through it with.
Yeah.
So I think
Yeah, I-
we bring things up
I
that
can
were
email.
Okay,
completely
okay.
added.
All right, sorry to I thought that was the one I was supposed to use. Okay.
But to your point, so if we go through, but one of our, I think Sean is gonna speak about the map that's in progress, and he's been working on, as an attempt to consolidate all the maps that are referenced in number 3 objective there. Because that's just too many different maps to go through.
A suggestion from what I'm seeing here is the one that was included in the packet, if you take accept all of the edits and have that as a stable document, that is what Kate then added to. So, so the logical thing would be to go through this one and then, whereas we made all of our comments on the old one, just have to reference that. It's a good point, though.
We're sorry that our vacation schedules.
Oh, no, not at all.
Well, the nice thing is that, I'm calling up the Google Doc here, and the nice thing is that Susan, when she did it, just did them all as suggestions, so you can see all Susan's edits and comments. I don't think it would be that hard to,
Well, we had
Merge.
made some changes earlier, though, that we put into the
that's-
actual document.
well, so I'm looking at Susan's comments in the actual document, but, so, it doesn't look like they're super extensive, so that if this becomes the new baseline, I think your edits there can be added into, or you can, look at them and add them or ignore them at your, wouldn't be that challenging.
Yeah, I don't know that I went all the way through with the comments.
One aspect of what is in there, we, at our, prior to our last SNRC meeting, got on the track of, in the recommended action section, there's a lot of them there. What would be the ones that are highest priority to us, so we can try to start getting those done, scratch them off and move forward. But we had the sense that that wasn't happening. So you'll see in the recommended action sections, we pulled forward our top 4 recommended items. So a lot of the red in here is scratching out those items from other places and putting them into the top 4. So there's a lot of red just because there's text being moved around. And then I guess another point that is,
So you're talking about red in this.
in what came in the packet,
Printed
yeah.
document.
Yeah.
Which would be the lighter color, lighter gray. Like this, I think this would be added, so this would be red, but that looks darker. That would have been original.
So all this is added?
It looks like it.
Looking at different colors of red.
Right, that's
What I'm seeing on the Google Drive doesn't have any red, it has a lot of yellow.
It just depends on how it gets printed. Yeah. Like when Dean called up that document, I was looking at it, it showed in purple, but it was green on mine. It's just,
Okay.
the color doesn't really matter. You have access to this Google Doc.
Yeah,
I mean, Dean shared it with us. No, I'm just saying, I think it would be easy for you to be able to see. It looks like almost everything Susan had marked up here is already noted in this new master doc.
Yeah.
Plus,
I just was doing this on, I was on the fly.
yeah, no, but
It
I
was
guess what I'm
easier to
saying
just
is,
have
I think this
an
is the
email. Yeah.
that's now a better document than this one. And
Oh, okay.
The whole point is improving this and changing it, so I think we all agree that we want to consider this the new baseline
I
doc
think
once
so,
we.
as long as you can recall, or if you have the document up, you can point out where new comments were made that aren't in the new one.
Right.
Because yes, of the 2 documents that we have in front of them, this one would be the more comprehensive of the 2, because it incorporates everything from the one that was in the packet. Just not the comments that were added after that. Is that right?
Yeah,
I think.
you haven't touched it since before you went away.
Yeah.
Oh, cool. All right. So then those would have been in the one that's in the packet anyway,
My comments were.
Well, yeah,
maybe.
they seem to be reflected in here.
Cool.
I mean, just looking at it quickly.
I hope I got them all. Check.
So I think, given time, I don't know that we'll be able to read through line by line everything, but are there highlights or particular things? Or do we want to go section by section? Because I know you have notes.
Well, I don't know
made
what
some
was
notes.
deleted. Maybe half the notes I did were deleted already, so I'm kind of lost.
We can figure out an alignment between the 2. So Kate went through the intro section and she added the red text in the printout that we got tonight. I didn't have any comments on that first section, and the things that were added is reasonable. And unless we're changing reference from open space to conservation fund, which could be done blanket through the whole document later.
The only other thing I noticed from Susan's comments that are in here earlier is that in the goal, we talk about it that they may be appropriately used and enjoyed now in the future, and Susan had changed that to appropriately protected and enjoyed now in the future.
I like that.
So I don't know if that's,
Yeah, I remember that change. I thought that change had been made.
well, she noted it on December 6th, so it's going back a little ways.
Okay.
That seems like an important change.
Right.
Yeah, like that.
So then, All right, so we did intro section gold. Do you want to highlight in the objective section, like if there are any notes? I did not have any there.
I have one question on precision, maybe it's good, maybe not. I'm on the stormwater committee and they want to do a map on impervious surfaces and stuff. Is that something you would be interested in or no?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
Stormwater committee wants to do a map on impervious surfaces.
Oh, that
So-
would be,
That would be-
that'd be a very key part of the type of.
So I don't know if that's something you want to add.
Yeah.
Probably should, I don't know how we coordinate that.
Well, at
Chris-
some point before too long,
Chris should probably be
there will
looking
be a
at this.
discussion about what are the maps that you want to try to have included in the plan. And that, I'm sure the list will have to get winnowed down, but as soon as you get the text worked through, that's one of the things that's on the agenda. Not for tonight, but for,
But you're right, the way the maps are made should be coordinated so that they can just be layered together. So I'll make a note to follow up with that.
Thank you.
I like that.
So Sean, you had a, you're sort of spearheading the map part, is that right?
Yeah, so the first step was to take the habitat, so-called habitat maps from the open space plan and convert it into something that was similar to the existing maps in the comprehensive plan. And I don't know if Dean can bring it up. If you can't, Dean, it's not that big of a deal. But it does speak to some of the things that, so this is actually the version from the open space plan.
No.
Or is that the one?
no, this is, I think, the one.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm confusing them. So
Yeah.
I think this was just an initial attempt at showing many of the things that you had suggested, Kate. So from a natural resources perspective, what you see there are many of the things that we, in fact, would want to conserve in some capacity. So the core forest areas, the various wetland features, and then the agricultural fields. Those are fields that are greater than 20 acres. And so it doesn't have some of the highly specific data elements that some town plans have, in which the previous Shelburne town plan had as well, natural heritage points, for instance. But it does have most of the major elements. So we have had some discussions. Dean and I have also had some communications about how best to present this information. There are some other examples, some good ones from Chittenden County, Williston, and South Burlington have some pretty nice maps. It does become ultimately a question, though, what sort of story do we want to present? Some of the maps from some of the adjacent towns are very complex and difficult to interpret, so it's, in my mind, a map like this one that shows some of the core habitat
If you want.
features, I think that's fine. Would certainly be a good place to start. From a natural resource perspective, of course, view sheds are also important, although in many cases I think they would be correlated with a lot of the features you see there, the fields that provide vistas, some of the undeveloped lands.
That would be an interesting layer to show how those two correlate.
Yeah, the problem there is that the existing map is based on ancient data.
Oh.
So we've had some discussions, and I think we've had some discussions here too, what it would take to redo the view shed analysis that was performed, again, some years ago. There are lots of ways of doing it, from the really simple to the highly sophisticated, and I'm not sure exactly which way we should go at this point. But it is something that we should certainly include in the town plan. I think there is language already to the effect that the existing map needs to be updated with newer technologies and to reflect the changes that have occurred since the original.
And
version was
is that
completed.
still from public vantage points? That's, I think, the way it used to be.
Significant views map is, yes, it's.
From
it's
public vantage
public-
points, okay.
It's oriented to views from public highways or from the water.
Okay.
And I think that we added a comment in here somewhere to the effect that it should be updated as changes may occur to those view sheds, so
Yeah.
that we don't wait another 10 or 15 years to make those changes if something occurs that changes it either naturally or as a result of development.
Yeah.
So expand and update the inventory of scenic and natural features, and the highest priority for updated mapping would be the new significant use map. That's,
We had a specific thing about how frequently it should be done.
Is it the kind of thing that could be updated like with an intern over the summer or something like that?
Yeah, or even as we see development review permit something that does intrude on that, that we update the map to reflect that.
But if you really wanted to do it well, you would take some of the newer data sets. So there's relatively new LiDAR for Chittenden County. So this is imagery that's collected from a laser, and it provides height information. So you can use that information to construct exactly what you can see from different vantage points. But there's obviously a very subjective component to viewsheds, so you probably would need someone to go back out to those locations that were vetted in the original viewshed analysis and see what you can see, because the subjective component is essential as well as the technological one.
Well, I'm wondering if this could be an opportunity to work with the HPDRC on that kind of, they could sort of weigh in on that cultural side of things, you know? Like you guys are the more objective scientific data stuff, and then they could weigh in on that, you know? I don't know.
there is a reference in the text that Andrew just shared with the group earlier that there's a map that was prepared as part of a study. It focused on the village area, but it did look at some portions of the rural parts of town, and it brought in those cultural elements. And so it's some of the information that you would need to do significant views, but it's by no means comprehensive. But it's focusing on the cultural aspects rather than the open
This could
space
also be
aspect.
something that could be crowdsourced, you know? I mean, that would be sort of cool. Like, what do people in Shelburne, what's the most important thing to the people who live here? You know, it might be not what we all imagine is important, you know? What makes Shelburne Shelburne? That could be sort of an interesting, you know, visual preference survey. We could get people to weigh in on that, and then that could lead to some, you know, impetus for trying to limit what could happen there. So lots of information to try and
Yeah, so
synthesize.
There's a lot of text in the current, or in the tentative town plan about maps, and that's a
Yeah.
discussion that really our committee should have with the planning commission about which ones to include, because, and we could look at some of the examples from other towns, because there are lots of different stories we could tell, and we don't necessarily have to repeat what had been done before, although again, we've tried to replicate with newer information what does already exist in the town plan.
Yeah, okay.
Back to the text.
Thanks, Steve.
So, in recommendation, objective 5, you'll notice I kind of thought we should go a little stronger on that. So change that to prohibit the alteration and disturbance by land development of significant natural areas and areas particularly at risk of degradation. You know, I don't know how doable that is, but I guess, you know, I invite you to see that as the degree of my support for this. It's on number 5 of the objectives. Yeah.
So page 2.
It's just, it's not right. Kate's version.
Just prohibit.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's just I just, you know, we do a lot of that. You know, we minimize to the greatest degree possible. You're sort of like begging the DRB, you know, and then it doesn't happen. And then, you know, there's like, you know, and for development that, you know, some developer is putting in and he's going to leave town and that's the last we'll see of him. You know, we've just gotten all these impacts that are going to be a fortune to mitigate and you know. So I was just trying to find, you know, how do we be
Clear.
Yes, let's shoot for more than minimize to the greatest extent possible. Let's shoot for higher standard outcome. To the greatest degree feasible under the law. How about that?
We tried to add some verbiage in here too, when you have a property owner who might be impacted by a prohibition, if we get that far. There's some suggested ways to try to get them to trade that off with some other kind of a benefit that they could reap by giving us the conservation or the visual preservation, whatever.
Well, you know,
So we need to,
and by calibrating all this stuff to water and hydrology, and now that we're going to have at some point this stormwater utility, I mean, who knows? Maybe there would be a way to give somebody some credit, and that is, you know, that we're literally paying them for their ecosystem service through some sort of, you know, the select board can make that decision, right? But there's a way to monetize some of this now that we haven't had before. It's just always been about, you know, my property rights and, you know, and then once that conversation starts, you know, it doesn't go to good places normally. So, because people do need to be compensated for, you know, an asset that they have a right to dispose of in some, you know, within parameters. So it's just, I think of this as kind of increasing the ways that can happen.
I had a question about the bracketed 1 and 2. Were those going to be like footnotes or references to something?
I was just looking at that too. There are.
they
footnotes
are
at the end.
at the very bottom.
Okay.
Yeah.
Where though?
The last page of that.
The last page.
Okay.
Yeah, I had those.
Got it. Were those in the one we had at home too? I must have missed. I flipped through, kept looking for them. They weren't in the one.
Bracketed?
Yeah,
There's a bracketed number
In the
1
document
here.
that Kate,
was on point 5
And the
here.
footnote is
22
over.
was on. It's on the page 29 page.
Yeah, I think that refers to Norwich.
From first down to least.
Got it.
But I don't think I saw the actual footnotes on the one that was in the
I
packet.
think
Yeah,
this
no,
is
I
just
didn't,
the
but
reference.
Right.
now they're here, but yeah,
Right.
Right.
got it.
I think that's, these brackets are what he's referring to.
All right. So that's.
I'd point you to, in
You want
the
to take the tech thing too, yeah. For-
recommended action section, item number 9, which is so it's before the agricultural specific section, but item 9 is then create incentives or other programs for conserving or protecting map, scenic, and natural resources. So we're trying to suggest some of those kinds of incentives.
Yeah. Maybe including transfer of development rights.
Yes.
Oh, great, okay.
Actually, that's in there twice.
yeah.
In
Although
that
it's never
same number
been
9.
especially clear to us that TDRs are working in South Burlington, but maybe we could get an update from the folks there on how
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
system works.
Economics won't let it work.
I mean, what would be great is if it could almost be like county-wide, you know, and something that could be administered by the CCRPC.
That'll be it.
I know, I'm ambitious, you know.
So again, going back, so we've got about 15 or 20 minutes on this section. I know we just jumped to 9, but we had gone through the intro, the objectives, and if we're into the recommended actions, might be good just to make sure that we get the various comments and observations noted. So yeah, we went through the objectives, the recommended actions section.
I had thought that maybe 3, 4, and 5 could be tied together and maybe bulleted, because they're all talking about the open space fund.
These are the recommended actions.
Right. In the beginning.
Here's no 5.
We've got 2 is plan with the watershed, that was Kate's new one. And then underneath that is 3, 4, and 5. And they're all talking about the open space fund and different things that we want to do. So maybe that could be somehow combined and bulleted to, I don't know, Kate, you're the wordsmith.
Oh, over here.
Does it make sense to you, or do you think those are that much different and that they should state it?
No, I think you're right. I think it would, I mean, anything to sort of simplify this and make it easier to understand.
Yeah, I think breaking them up a little bit helps you to sort of focus on what the points are.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was thinking that bullets would do the same thing, and
That could-
understand that we're,
So we have recommended actions that are top priority, and then we have recommended actions for achieving the goal and objectives.
And that was our effort to pull out the ones that are the highest priority to get done first.
Okay, so you've got
So
the
we might
top.
want to just reframe what the title of those sections are or something. Prioritize recommended actions or something like that.
But just to make sure I understand, so you have the top, where are they?
Top
Yeah.
4.
So there's, right, the top 4, and then there's the list of all recommended actions, which currently has 10. And then there's sections specifically related to agricultural resources, wildlife, visual, and water quality. Are those all part of that 10?
They're all the individual recommended items. It's a long list.
Okay, so there's a list of 4 top priority, and then there's 10 recommended actions, and then there's 6 for agriculture, 3 for wildlife, 3 for visual, and 3 for water quality. Okay, and they're all independent of each other.
Right.
Okay. Okay.
We tried to get started on consolidating where we could,
Yeah, well, this
taking
is
out some redundancies that we're seeing, but there's probably more of
zero
that kind of
judgment.
work.
I'm going through the same thing on the energy stuff right
Yeah.
now, and it's hard to figure out how to
And it's
block them
hard
together,
when we
but
meet once a month.
that as well. Because when I was going through, there were some that seemed that they were duplicating, so I was just curious if I missed the fact that they were actually duplicates. But if they're not, I like the idea of having a prioritized list, but then this could be helpful in other sections as well if there's a way of tagging recommended actions
Yeah.
so that they can be sorted or
Do you
something.
know there's, I just found out about this like a week ago or so, but Hinesburg updated their town plan just this past fall, which sort of flew under our radar because we had already embarked on this. And they did it, it's really good, and particularly the habitat resource section of it is really clear, and they have different needs and priorities than we do, but some of it might be helpful. They've got this sort of bulleted approach, like these are the big goals for each of these areas, and I just encourage you guys to take a look at that. It might help kind of organize things, and anyway, it's very clear and straightforward and pithier. So,
I think what we were striving to do is stay within the format that was, because this has to fit with the format of the whole town plan. So I think we were a little reluctant to change format
Yeah, and
substantially.
and with that, and again, completely recognize that challenge because going through it on energy. But so I'm wondering if we just had a list of all of the recommended actions, and then at the end of each one in brackets, you could have like a priority tag, a water-related tag, agriculture, whatever it is. Just have something in brackets so that if nothing else, somebody could go through and search for a keyword and.
Yeah, I think the one thing that our committee, our larger committee came up with was, though, that because our list is so long, pulling out the ones that we felt were the highest priority up top
Oh, absolutely.
made
yeah.
some sense.
Yeah, that does make sense. Well, all right. Well, I suppose with that said, on the priorities section of recommended actions, number 3 in the packet version had a line that said, and number 3 revolves around basically water. And there was a line on section 3 that said development with adverse impacts on surface or groundwater should be physically isolated to protect the waters. The only reason I bring that up is because that got moved to the end of number 4 in the updated document. So, so number 4 has this last line, development with adverse impacts,
Oh,
that
yeah.
guy. But in the original one, it's actually at the end of number 3 here. And I think that line, because it talks about impacts on surface and groundwater, belongs with number 3.
Okay.
Because it talks about water, whereas 4 talks about updating inventory of scenic and natural features.
My goof.
No goof.
That's why so many eyes are good.
Yeah, that's right. Okay. And then I thought,
I'm wondering, Don, if on C where the provide incentives for stuff like impervious pavement or pavements and water conservation, I think stormwater is going to offer incentives as well. Economic incentive. Well, I don't know if it's going to be for single family though. So maybe it. But for commercials, it'll be to their economic, their wallet. If they do some of these things, they'll get discounts, commercial properties.
Which part are you?
On 7C, we're talking about providing incentives to encourage developers. So if it's a commercial developer, you may not have to provide the incentive. The incentive is going to be there already for them to do stormwater ponds, to reduce, pretty much take all of these things. But for residents, it might be a good idea to.
Isn't this more comprehensive than what the stormwater utility will provide for incentives?
Yes, well,
Green roofs and, well, that would be covered.
well, they
Not
would want to
energy
be
stuff.
doing those things too. They would want to do all these things. But again, this would be good for residents, I guess. For residential
For
development.
single, yeah. So that's good, then we would cover that base.
So, again, I think adding some language in there about appropriate for the setting makes a lot of sense, because a practice that might make sense in a rural area where, there's a lot of open land, it is going to work against our trying to achieve density that we want to have in the growth areas, and not achieving that kind of density, or by result, encouraging a more spread out pattern of development could create more encroachments on streams and things like that than we want. So the idea would be to always keep in mind the smallest footprint that development can occur on. So regardless of the setting, that would, I think, be, goal number one, to create fewer impacts, but then mitigate those impacts based on, what is necessary for the setting. So the priority in a rural area might look different than it does in, like, for example, the town center. So the site plan that is going through the Development Review Board right now for the changes to the town center, when I had a chance to see those as someone on the Paths Committee, I was kind of surprised to see that a lot of the stormwater mitigations really are working against a lot of the sort of vibrant pedestrian atmosphere that we were hoping to create there. So, that would be a case where, to me, the priority is in the wrong place. So how do you achieve that in a way that doesn't result in, work against fostering the sense of place, the pedestrian sense of place that we want to have there? So maybe different techniques could be emphasized. So, for example, there are no street trees anywhere. So that seems like kind of a huge missed opportunity in that setting. And instead of having a kind of stormwater detention thing that is proposed that, frankly looks like the kind of thing that's in front of the Kinney Drug out on Route 7, how that's something that is linear and could actually be a design feature, or ideally even maybe not quite right smack in the middle of everything, but pushed off to the sides, or incorporated into some sort of gardens that might be associated with the public spaces for passive, quiet recreation associated with the new library. So just kind of thinking a bit more in terms of what's appropriate for the setting.
So with a comment like that, do you want to try to make an edit at this time and add the words, locationally appropriate or something like that? Or is the group going to be taking that back and considering it? I guess I do want to get a grip on how the comments are going to be moved forward through the draft. And is it, you have a copy of the file, there's...
Yeah, I would strengthen that to be, not just incentives, but provide direction on what we expect. And, that, again, that gets to that more granular, form-based standards, so that it's understood what is expected in each setting.
Yeah, I think the language should be more declarative, that this is what we want, not necessarily have to ask them to consider it for an incentive.
Because then it's the DRB, decides, well, is this an incentive or not? And, we get into all that stuff, which ends up...
I heard a lot of that last night.
Yeah. They don't know. In their defense, it's hard for them to know. So I think I'd like us to move to, we want this in this place, this in this place, this in this place. And, and it takes into account all of the things that are important, so the resiliency issues, resiliency would be the main goal in the village, right? Out in portions of the growth area and certainly in the rural district, it would be habitat protection and resiliency. Do you see where I'm going with this? So, and maybe, view shed protection or, whatever.
I think we tried to address that from the very get-go with the first objective, just saying, ensure that the, zoning bylaws and subdivision regs accomplish the following. So thinking that if we had provide incentives, then when those are revised, specific language can be put in there about how to actually do it.
How
I
about
think that's
changing
what
that
we
to revise the zoning and subdivision regulations to accomplish the following things? Like, just be really, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or you could say direct the development to protect the mapped scenic and natural resources.
Yeah.
Okay, so you want just more direct, clear language, I think we can do
You
that.
know,
Yeah.
when you're in the I was on the
Yeah,
DRB for 3
yeah.
years, and anybody can come up and say, well, what does this really mean? And then they start changing it around. If you say exactly what you want, it makes it easy for the DRB.
Well, particularly since we have on-the-record review, because that makes everybody, very careful. And so I think the more that we can be very clear about what we want up front and create a standard that, did you meet it? No, yes, no, and we put into place, like this has to be an engineer has to sign off, or, whatever the standard is. There's some really great checklists that are starting to be developed out there to, ensure that conformity and compliance. So, yeah, just,
An example, last night at the DRB, we were talking about the overlook on the La Platte and the new project that's proposed for the other side of the Platte. And we had asked, looking at one of the very specific zoning regs, that there be protection of the view across the river. But they read the regulation and interpreted it to say, well, the scenic thing is the other side of the river. And the river, people aren't going to care about what's up there.
oh, not the views from the
From-
scenic, from the
from the
recreational
overlook.
asset,
Right.
the public,
Where was
which
that
is the
from?
public
And
vantage
we had
point,
quite
right?
Right, and we
Yeah.
had quite
The
a
private-
discussion about it,
that's the
but
private
they
vantage
wouldn't
point.
accept it.
Yeah. So that's, that's an example of like clarifying what is meant by a public vantage point, so, yeah.
So since we're right in that area,
Yeah, you guys can really, you have vast experience of going to those meetings and know all the reasons why they say ultimately that you can't get what you want. So,
Rewrite it that
just,
way.
exactly, right, so that doesn't happen anymore. Because it's really helpful, like the DRB sometimes will come to us and say, we don't really understand what you mean by this, so, when you're not the body that's actually implementing them, it's kind of hard to know.
so
Did you have other additions and comments to the latter part of the document where there are no red?
I was wondering
Concerns?
about item 3 under actions specifically related to ag. And it says to implement right to farm. Didn't we implement that already? Don't we have a right to farm in the,
It's been done on a project-by-project basis. To my knowledge, there hasn't been some global right to
okay.
farm act on the part of the town.
no, I'm good with that then.
And the question has been, what comes first? Did the development come first, or is the farming coming first? If you look at the Clark Farm up on, not the Clark Farm, but the farm up on Spear Street, that farm it was always a farm, but there's development around it, and so people are concerned about if they want to have movies and if they want to have other things going on there. So what constitutes farming nowadays when you have value-added agriculture is another question.
Well, it kind of comes down to, would you like that to be just a whole bunch of houses, or would you,
Can't be houses there.
That particular property
Yeah.
has a condition of approval that says it can't be subdivided.
Well, I
Most
think
of-
New Village Farm had that same question, so that clarification would be smart.
Yeah.
on that same page, from an editing standpoint, the top, number 8, amend the subdivision regulations to specify a design process. That's the same as number 2 in the list of prioritized recommended actions. And then number 10 has support education and outreach programs a couple of times within it. That may be intentional. Reading it, it just seemed a little duplicative.
Not to say it needs to be solved now, but just to call
Yeah.
it out as something to look at.
What was the issue with 10? I'm sorry.
10 has support education and outreach programs twice.
Twice.
But I mean, they're different sentences, but they start the same way.
Okay, weird.
Yeah. Yeah, and
Someone was
there
editing.
was another one somewhere that I passed that had that too, so we should look for that.
Yeah, I thought I have that note somewhere because I know I saw a couple of them, but the only other
Earlier
one.
on,
Yeah,
there were duplications.
but number 8 above that is already exists in the priority list. Yeah. Right. John Public. Nice. So given where we are with time, is this good feedback to go through and another pass at just, I don't want to say organize. I think some formatting might help as well, like the just
Take a look
spacing
at
things out a
Hinesburg.
little bit.
Yeah, but again, as Susan said, we were trying to conform with the way the other parts of the plan were developing. So maybe it would make sense to develop a concept and format or a template for how you want the whole plan to look before we start individually
Yeah, I mean,
tackling one section.
when I say format, I didn't mean shifting stuff around. It's more like in the other sections, in between recommended actions, there's spaces between lines. So just having a little bit of space so that, like, I just went through and drew lines around each of the sections saying this is specific to this and this is that. But I think if they're just adding some line space in between sections, I think would be good. And then the bullets or the numbering is different between sections. So just, I don't know how others are, but just
Consistency.
visually, yeah, having that consistency, it helps with aligning what's
But
going on.
I think moving to bullets where you can and it would be helpful. And and anyway, Hinesburg has, it's not dissimilar to what you're trying to achieve. And it's pithy and some good bullets and.
But would you prefer
yeah.
that we didn't have these actions specifically related to different resources, or is that helpful?
You know,
Because to me, sometimes, I was struggling with not being redundant, but at the same time trying to focus. If someone
Yeah.
really wanted to think about
I-
what are resources.
I would leave that up to you guys, however you think it's important to present this, because.
it's more that's where I was coming from with the tagging concept. But there's pros and cons with everything. So I'm okay to have them broken out that way as long as you don't have the same recommended
The
action in
redundancy.
multiple sections, because
Right.
then
Yeah.
it's just distracting.
You've got the top 4, and then you've got the next 10.
Yeah,
They're
we've got
not.
confusing.
Well, I guess what I'm wondering, are they?
More generic.
So number 1 in the next section, is that really 5? So in other words, it's a continuation of the first list, or are they specific to certain areas like agricultural resources or wildlife, so that they could then be moved into those sections? I mean, that might
Starting
be.
to think that way because at one point I raised the concept of trying to tie this in as much as we can to our open space plan format, which does have those sections.
Yeah.
I mean, I like the sections. I guess
Yeah.
what I'm just saying is either this is 1 through 10 with a note in the front saying the first 4 are the highest priority, or these could, if they're more specific to each area, they could be, or if they all are of a type, they could be lumped together. But again, that's just more of a formatting kind of aesthetic thing than content.
I think we could definitely work with it to make it more user-friendly.
Yeah.
I think the breakout is good though. It's because that'll be
And
helpful.
And help people find things in here.
It does. I think that, as I remember, I just kind of passed through the Hinesburg one, but I think they break it out into, like you're doing here. And anyway, I just remember they had sort of, it was just easy, goal, priority, just like it was bulleted, it was easy to look at. And I think Dean has been working with Maya Smith on incorporating pictures and visuals and, so it's not gonna, it's gonna look better than the one that we have, yeah.
Yeah, we haven't, Maya and I have been working on trying to get
Yes,
the
exactly.
money together, but she isn't actually doing anything yet.
Yeah.
It's,
But just simpler to.
The town of Norwich has a really nice town plan too.
Yeah, on the back of the map, you had links to a lot of those.
yeah, I was, in the conversations that I'd had with Sean about possible maps, different suggestions have been made about different towns, and so that's a quick way to look, to see what other towns do. There is quite a range of approaches.
I know, yeah, that's nice, yeah. We were just noticing on that, Andrew called up the Hinesburg one on his laptop, and they put like a little top priority by, the goal.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah,
kind
if
of
you scroll to
effective.
page like 45, 46. There's the
Yeah.
little, top priority there you can see.
Right.
There are so many things I'd love to do.
I know, so.
So what's the turnaround time for the next revision?
Well, we have the schedule back here.
Yeah.
So, do you want to segue into that conversation since your plans for the
You
date
know-
of the next meeting are?
Yeah, that's a good point. So so there was the hazmat plan that was in there that I think was more informational, right?
Well, it's that plan is something that could save a lot of effort, but because it can be cited in fulfilling the requirement for the flood language. We have a new flood resiliency requirement as a result of statute. The question has been posed ever since the very first schedule, where will that material come from? What group is going to be responsible for preparing it, or what person? I had tagged it or connected it to natural resources early on, and that's why I've kept it tied to natural resources. But I just wanted people to understand that the statute says that you can cite the all hazards mitigation plan in response to that requirement.
So we just have an objective or recommended action to refer
Could
to.
Maybe be as simple as that, or maybe taking 2 or 3 statements from the document, pulling them in. I think maybe more than just referring to it, but it's source material that can be used, and the question of who's going to do that, is it gonna be the Natural Resources Committee? They got enough on their plate. You say, Dean, give us 3 things from that, but it'll be joined with this section, or do you want it in a separate section?
It would make sense to have it in that section. Yeah,
I think
it would make
in
sense
ways
to me
it,
anyway.
it makes sense, but anyway, that was why it was there. If we had time to discuss it, we could get into some of the weeds, but I wanted people to know that that all hazards mitigation plan is gonna save you a lot of work, I hope.
Absolutely. Well, I think at a high level, would certainly take that recommendation of pulling out 3 key things, if that's better than just figuring out a way to reference the document and say for these reasons or something.
Yeah, and the other thing that document has, it has a bunch of maps too. And so we won't have to create some of the maps.
Yeah, I
If
didn't
we
look at the
choose
larger
not to.
document, but the summary looked like it gave reference to a lot of really good stuff.
Yeah.
All right, so this, should we just make the call, given the time, to table the towers and telecom?
So moved.
Second.
Yeah, Jamie had indicated that he hoped to be here. He's not here, he's not.
Yeah, so maybe,
Slacker.
it is a smaller section, I do have some comments, but if we hold that maybe until next time and,
Yeah, that
It's a
works.
short section,
yeah.
but there's basketball.
There's what?
Basketball.
Yeah.
Yeah. All
Also
right.
on the docket for next time is transportation. That is a pretty substantial section.
We're
and-
wahoos.
and
Can't believe Virginia got
I
knocked
can tell
out.
you
So
that
we just couldn't
There's
believe
been
it.
discussion of the transportation section at the PADS committee.
Yeah, we
There
lived there for
may be more
3 years, too.
resident interest in that section than there has been for some of the other sections.
Fair.
So there could be more of a conversation with the audience or
Wait, this is
transportation.
which we had for.
Yeah, that was
Next time.
put on the agenda for the first meeting in April as they kind of tie it all up, and we're ready to put it in that pile so that we could give it to someone like Maya and say, start to put this into a new document.
Which, yeah, because that first one in April, as I mentioned earlier, I will not be in town.
I just found out I won't be either.
You're not here next meeting? Everybody, what about everybody else?
You gonna be in Japan? High five.
No, Florida.
Well,
Unless something better comes along.
Yeah.
here.
So we have three, we need us or a new member.
Okay. So we've got some stuff to work out.
Yeah,
Okay.
there is an extra, the good news is there's an extra week between, because there are 5 Thursdays this month. So.
Yeah.
We'll have to sort through
Well,
that.
we can plan our Tuesday morning if you're available. I can do that again.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so we will need to figure that out though, because I would prefer not to do energy without being here. So does that mean, well, in transportation then is you, Kate, right? So then I'm not sure what would be.
Keep talking about natural resources.
The other thing about April is that the second meeting date is in the middle of
Let's go vacation.
April break, and I know I'll be gone for that one.
Which one's that?
The second April meeting?
The 26th.
I'm pretty sure I'm gonna miss
Isn't
May
it?
10th.
Maybe we'll send out a reminder, or here's the link again for the schedule, that schedule spreadsheet, and we can get a better handle on those things, and that can help us as when we meet, try to sort that out.
Yeah.
But in terms of the next agenda, continuing to,
Natural
lot of
resources, it is. I think that'd be good. I mean, I'd obviously like to hear it, but.
that would be in 3 weeks.
So we could do that, telecom, I could pass along, I could check in with Jamie and just make sure that he has my comments.
And we could make that point as we segue to the presentation to the select board on Tuesday night, because they want to check in with schedule, you can drive home that point.
Is that this Tuesday?
Right.
Are we ready to go to that point of the
That,
agenda?
I actually can't do Tuesdays because I've got calls
fine.
Tuesday nights.
Okay, because they were going to schedule it early.
Yeah, my call's at 8:30. I need to be home by about 8:15, so I can stay around
Yeah,
until I have to
Joe
go.
scheduled it for 7:15.
Okay.
Yeah, he's got his stormwater going in there early too.
Yeah,
So I'll
he
be
has
there
it
for
for
that.
15 minutes,
Thumb
and he
wrestle?
did move it to the first business item.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I can come for as long as I can be there. Yeah, and then otherwise, I guess we'll sort through some stuff Tuesday morning and figure it out.
Are we all supposed to be here on the 27th, or how's that?
Well, invitation is certainly to all. The request came from
Oh, it's not this week.
the town manager, or this, I guess the select board. I'm trying to remember exactly the origins, but it's to have a conversation with the select
What's
board.
today?
Where are things now? What's the vision for the schedule? Joe has a copy of this schedule that I prepared, which was combining a couple of the schedules that we've worked with in the past that show the individual elements, but then also bring in the approval process. And so I think they're going to be wanting to know, well, when would they receive a draft, and when would they need to have their hearings if we're going to meet the deadlines? And working off of this chart, everything drives from the first meeting in February where they would have their second hearing and adopt it.
Do we have any sections that are finished?
Well, the ones that were, yes, is the short answer. You've done Parks and Rec, you've done childcare, you've done vision and intro. Housing, I think, is in that same category. Am I
Can we
remembering that right?
submit them a partial to let them,
Well, that could be a conversation that you have on Tuesday night, is do you, select board members, want to have pieces forwarded? That was done 5 years ago, not in pieces, but hey, start looking at this please now, and it didn't really result in any comments, because I don't know that any of them had time to look at it.
I mean, would they
It's
have
not on
time
a
if it's a
deadline.
full document?
That'll really be.
Silence is acceptance, right? Sorry, this is on
Well,
camera.
yeah, I mean, and I think that's gonna be one of the benefits of this conversation, is where are their heads as far as changes?
I think it would be good, yeah, whatever the state is, I mean, I don't think that we're gonna have a complete alpha draft very near term, but I think we've got sections that have enough progress that can be reviewed, and we can talk about a framework on how best to present that, or,
And I will try to get a better idea of what it is more specifically they think that they want in terms of presentation. Is it just to meet and check in, or are they looking for something, just look at the schedule and answer questions?
right, okay. Okay, so we'll,
So at this point,
Figure stuff.
again, it's on the agenda as the first business item, and it's there for 15 minutes, and not Tuesday night here.
okay. Okay, so then we'll meet Tuesday, the next one, okay to move on? No objections? Do we have any updates?
Nothing from me.
Thank
I
you.
mean, I mentioned,
Sure, thank you.
before not having a contract with Maya yet, just so that people know that, but do want to get a better idea from the town manager on the financial side. And I'm optimistic, but I don't have an okay from him yet, and he's just been scarcer recently.
Sure, yeah, I would love to know what the options are that we have, because if the reality is there's no money for it, then, okay, that,
Yeah, and from my perspective, there's money. Looking at it through the lens that I look at it through, there would be money to do it. Some considerations are to keep it under $5,000, having to do with, how we go through selection process and stuff like that. So there's an advantage to keeping it to less than $5,000, and Maya knows that, and she's agreeable. It's just structuring where the dollars will come from each fiscal year and getting someone who can say yes to that to say yes to it. I by myself can't say yes to it, but I believe the dollars are there.
okay.
we're talking about form base?
No, we're talking about hiring Maya to,
okay.
yeah,
Make it pretty.
yes.
On just a pure competitive basis, like, that Hinesburg one and the Essex one, we just.
Oh, I know,
mean,
right?
It would
The
be,
game's been upped.
Yeah.
It has.
would be embarrassing to have something that isn't in that league.
And we have to remember too, that the former chair of this august body liked the idea, and he's now on the select board, so.
I absolutely, for the record, would love to pursue that if we have the funds. I just didn't want it to be distracting if it's, yeah. But yeah, let's hope for the best and,
So I guess from a timing standpoint too, right, we could pass it in a relatively unattractive format.
To the select board? Or-
Yeah. And then it could
be.
go to print and be slightly more beautiful
Well, I think that.
with no changes of words, or, it might move some things around on a page, because
Yeah.
you're adding a picture and Maya's design, I guess.
So my take is that if the issue of the funding can be resolved quickly, I would like to hold off giving it to the select board until it's attractive. I mean, I want it to be compelling.
So I've been working on the future land use section, and I have to say, I found myself starting to use the first person plural, like we, a lot. it just started to happen as I was writing. So I just wanted to kind of suggest that I'll see what you guys think, and if it's just seems horrible or completely unacceptable, that's fine. But it just seemed, I looked at some other town plans from other places in the country when we were just kind of doing our initial thing, and I think some places did, talk about that, like, we would like, that sort of
Primary
language.
policy document for the town, why?
Yeah,
why
so
not
I was
just-
just kind of like thinking, if we're gonna have pictures and, colors and different font sizes and
Has
stuff
a
like
voice.
that, Because it's so, this is, so much of this is, inshore and there's some other things that are just, amend to more effectively, it's also shall be updated promptly as changes, it's like, who's gonna,
I think that's a great idea.
so like.
Yeah, no, I've tried.
It's 2018.
I've wanted to poke my eyes out a few times in trying to edit these documents because, you look at it and you think I can fix this, but then you're like, I don't even know what that means. I don't think I should change it because I think
Yeah.
it must have been important at some time, so I have to leave it there, and then you can't rewrite. So
Let's keep our eyes to this process.
Yeah,
That's
I
important.
know.
no, I get into sort of analysis paralysis at times where I'll just stare at the document and I'll just shut my computer and walk away because I'm like, hey, I'm frozen.
Yeah.
Anyway,
We're almost safer with like a blank page.
Yeah, agreed. All right, so that's updates. Any commissioner questions or comments?
Still a vacancy, if you know people, spread the word.
Is that on their agenda, do you know, at all?
Yes, their draft agenda, or I think it's posted now, has a spot on it for them to appoint new people, as well as some of the unfilled, but if you weren't appointed or reappointed earlier, it could happen Tuesday night. So if someone comes forward between now and Tuesday night, it's possible that could take place Tuesday as part of that agenda item.
Thanks.
Kate and I have each talked to one candidate who's interested.
yeah.
Good, we can push that along.
Yeah, the person
Yeah.
who had thought they wanted to do it before doesn't, so.
Well, I think, from what I understand, has already committed to something else.
Oh, okay.
On a different board, so.
Okay, yes.
No longer can.
Right. Picked up another portfolio, basically.
Yeah. So,
So this may be, the person we're talking about may be that person's spouse who's.
Well, what I understood was
speaking,
that
right?
person's spouse was the original idea for this group anyway, and
That should be great. Yeah, so we'll push that along.
Awesome.
I'll tell her I expect to see her on Tuesday.
yeah.
Is there any other business or correspondence to announce?
none.
Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved?
Second.
All right, all done. All in
Senior
favor?
people know how to move things.
Aye.